When God Was a Woman by Merlin. Chapter 3, Part 1. Women, where woman was deified. The question most pressing, perhaps the one that has most insistently caused this book to come into being, is this. What effect did the worship of the female deity actually have upon the status of women in the cultures in which she was extolled? Hines, Evans, Langdon, and many others have referred to the ancient goddess-worshipping societies as matriarchal. Exactly what does this imply? It would be easy to enter into a seesaw type of reasoning here. That is to say, they worshipped a goddess, therefore women must have held a high status. Or because women held a high status, therefore a goddess was worshipped. Though these two factors, if we judge by the attitudes of the societies that worship the male deities of today, may have been closely related. Yet various views on the subject should be considered, even those in which cause and effect appear to be confused or simultaneous events are perceived as linear. What we want to achieve is as comprehensive an understanding as possible of the relationship of the female religion to the position of women. In The Dominant Sex, M. Varading, writing in Germany in 1923, asserted that the sex of the deity was determined by the sex of those who were in power. The ruling sex, having the power to diffuse its own outlooks, tends to generalize its specific ideology. Should the trends of the subordinate sex run counter, they are likely to be suppressed all the more forcibly in proportion as the dominant sex is more overwhelming. The result is that the hegemony of male deities is usually associated with the dominance of men, and the hegemony of female deities with the dominance of women. Sir James Frazer believed that the high status of women was initially responsible for the veneration and esteem of the female deity. He cited the Palau clan of Micronesia, where the women were considered to be socially and politically superior to the men. This preference for goddesses over gods, he wrote, in the clan of the Palau Islanders has been explained, no doubt rightly, by the high importance of women in the social system of the people. Robertson Smith connected the choice of the sex of the supreme deity to the position of dominance of the male or female within the family. He suggested that, as a result of the kinship system, the sexual identity of the head of the family formulated the sexual identity of the supreme deity. Each of these is an example of the theory that the sex of the deity is determined by a previously existing dominance of one sex over the other. In the case of the goddess, the higher position of women in the family and in society. Alongside these theories, there have been reams of pseudo-poetic material about the deification of the female as the symbol of fertility by the male, the awe of the magic of her ability to produce a child, supposedly making her the object of his worship. As I just mentioned, Frazer suggested that the high status of women led to the worship of the goddess as supreme being, basing his conclusions on years of study of primitive and classical societies. But as a result of this research, he also connected the worship of the female deity to a mother kinship system and ancestor worship, explaining that wherever the goddess is superior to the god and ancestresses more reverently worship than ancestors, there is nearly always a mother-kin structure. Robertson Smith also related the sexual identity of the supreme deity to the kinship system prevalent in each society. Whatever the suggested order of cause and effect, one of the major factors which continually appears in the material concerned with the status and role of women in the ancient female religion in historic times is its close connection to female kinship. Matrilineality, perhaps, the very origins of its development. In examining the position of women, the mother of female kin structures leading to matrilineal descent of name and property should be carefully studied. Matrilineality is generally defined as the societal structure in which inheritance takes place through the female line, sons, husbands, or brothers gaining access to title and property only as the result of their relationship to the woman who is the legal owner. Matrilineal descent does not mean matriarchy, which is defined as women in power, or more specifically, the mother as the head of the family, taking this position in community or state government as well. In some matrilineal societies, the brother of the woman who holds the rights to the name and property plays an important role. Yet we cannot ignore the probability that matrilineal and matrilocal customs would affect the status and position of women in various ways. The subtleties of the power and bargaining position that come with the ownership of house, property, or title, or as in matrilocal societies, women residing in the village or home of their own parents rather than their in-laws, should be considered. The economics of the Neolithic and early historic agricultural societies were discussed by sociologist V. Klein in 1946. She suggested that in early society, women wielded the main resources of wealth. They were the owners of the house, the producers of food. They provided shelter and security. Economically, therefore, man was dependent upon woman. Societies that followed female or mother kinship customs have been known in the past and still appear in many areas of the world. The theory that most societies were originally matrilineal, matriarchal, and even polyandrous, one woman with several husbands, was the subject of several extensive studies in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Scholars such as Johann Bachofen, Robert Bredefault, and Edward Hartland accepted the idea of ancient matriarchy and polyandry, substantiating their theories with a great deal of evidence, but they regarded these systems as a specific stage in evolutionary development. They suggested that all societies had to pass through a matriarchal stage before becoming patriarchal and monogamous, which they appear to have regarded as a superior stage of civilization. But as Jaquita Hawkes observes, today it is unfashionable to talk about former, more matriarchal orders of society. Nevertheless, there is evidence from many parts of the world that the role of women has weakened since earlier times in several sections of social structure. Most of the studies of matriarchy were based upon anthropological analogy in the classical literature of Greece and Rome. Since most of these works were researched in the 19th and earliest part of the 20th centuries, these writers did not have access to much of the archaeological evidence that is available today. Despite specific misunderstandings or biased value judgments, we may yet find that these writers were prophetically ahead of their time. Today we have the use of a much greater body of material produced by extensive archaeological excavation of the Near and Middle East throughout this century, as well as the material available to those earlier writers. It is true that the chance fortunes of archaeological finds, what remains undiscovered, what is found too damaged to read, and what cannot be deciphered, and what has perished as the result of the nature of the original material present limitations. Hammurabi's Law Code of Babylon, about 1790 BC, long regarded as the oldest ever compiled, is not known to have been preceded by several others, more recently discovered. Still, only one of these dates back to about 2300 BC, and the others to about 2000 BC or slightly later. So we must still rely on material that appears in written form only after the beginnings of the northern invasions, but carefully sifting through the available evidence and commentary, which differ according to location and era, we may gain some insight into the status of women in goddess-worshipping societies. The goddess religion, though slowly declining, still existed.